going to be on the customary units of time. Units of time expand from 1 year all the way down to a second. Some of the common measurements are what are listed here below, that there are 60 seconds in 1 minute, 60 minutes in 1 hour, 24 hours in a day, 7 days to 1 week, 52 weeks are in a year, as well as 12 months, and 365 days are in a year. We're going to use some of this information to convert between back and forth hours, minutes, days, weeks, months, and years, as well as figuring out when did a certain event start or stop through elapsed time examples. The first thing I would like you to do on your notes is using the units of time. Pause your video and write down, if I was going to eat an apple, am I going to measure that in seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, or years? Same thing with an age of a person. How do we measure that? The amount of time it takes to put on a hat and the amount of time it would take for a long car trip. Go ahead and pause your video and come back with your answers. Hopefully, when you were working through those answers, you were able to say that eating an apple, you're probably going to finish that in minutes, not seconds. Hours would be too long. We know that the age of a person is going to be counted in years. We know that putting on a hat, that's only going to take us seconds. And depending on the length of the car ride, I'm assuming they wanted hours here, but maybe you're going so far it's going to take you days. But I'm pretty sure that hours is what we're going to measure our long car trip in. As we move forward, there are a handful of units of time that we need to know how to convert in between. We need to know, how do I take minutes and turn them into seconds, and so on and so forth. So in these first few, we're going to work through some conversions together, and then I'll see if you're able to do any of these down here on your own. I do want to give you a heads up, however, that number 13 is a little bit tricky. As we look at these first few examples, I have 1 minute equals 30 seconds. That is coming directly from my units of times conversion chart, and I know that this is true. However, what I have happening here is essentially a ratio, a proportion. And what my proportion is saying is I don't know what this answer is. I know, though, that I went from 1 minute to 4 minutes. Well, to go from 1 minute to 4 minutes, I multiplied it by 4. Well, that must mean I do the same thing to this side, so I need to take the 60 seconds and multiply it by 4 to get an answer. In order to figure out what that is, when I multiply it, I get 240. So 4 minutes is the same as 240 seconds. In question number 2, we're comparing days to hours. I know from my conversion chart that 1 day is the same as 24 hours. I can look over here and I know that that is the correct conversion. So what I'm trying to find then is, well, how many hours are there in 3 days? Again, this is already kind of neatly set up for us. I could change this up and say, well, to go from 1 day to 24 hours, I had to multiply by 24, so I could do the same thing here. Or I could just say, well, to go from 1 down to 3, I had to multiply by 3. For 1 day, it was 24 hours. So if I make it 3 times more, I need to do the same thing here. And when I take this times 3, I'm going to get 72 hours. Last but not least, this one is comparing 1 week that has 7 days in it. And it says, well, if I had 7 days, how do I get up to 35 days? Well, I know that 7 times 5 is 35. I'm going to do the same thing here to the other side. 1 week times 5 gives me 1 times 5 is 5. 5 weeks is the same as 35 days. So what happens in these remaining questions when I don't have it neatly set up like this? Well, you set it up yourself. So in this case, I'm comparing hours, and I want to know how many minutes that is. So I need to come to my chart and say, well, you know what? For 1 hour, there are 60 minutes. 1 hour is 60 minutes. So I'm going to write that underneath here. 1 hour is the same as 60 minutes. That looks awful. I'll see if I can erase that and write that again. Is the same as 60 minutes. Again, I just have a real neat proportion set up here. So again, I can look at this in a few different ways. I can say, well, to go from here to here, I had to divide by 6. Or from here to here, I had to multiply by 6. In this case, I'm multiplying to get up to my numerator, and that's okay. 1 times 6 is 6, but that means I have to do the same thing on this side. 60 times 6. That is going to give me 360 minutes. In this case, this one's a little bit different. We have 2 years equals how many days? So years to days is this conversion right here at the top. 1 year equals 365 days. Notice when I set up my proportion, I am writing the same words underneath each other. So I'm not putting days here, I'm putting the 1 year. And on this side, I'm putting 365 days. So how did I go from a 1 to a 2? Well, 1 times 2 would get me up here. So that means I need to take this same thing and multiply it by 2. When I multiply that, I get 730 days is the same as 2 years. What I would like you to do is pause and get through all of these remaining, at least up to number 12. I'll help you with 13, but try it if you want a little bit of a challenge. Pause the video, see if you can get these, and come back and check your answers. If you completed these, setting up your ratios and figuring out what you had to multiply, you should have 2 days here, 3 weeks here. 300 minutes is the same as 5 hours. 540 seconds is the same as 9 minutes. 6 weeks is the same as 42 days. 96 hours is the same as 4 days. 180 minutes is the same as 3 hours. In this case, what you're going to notice is that I do not have a measurement up here that goes from hours to seconds. I have hours to minutes and minutes to seconds. So what I'm going to have to do here is I'm going to have to take a little step in between. The first thing I need to do is say, okay, I need to go from 1 hour to minutes first, because I do have that conversion. I have 1 hour to minutes. I know 1 hour equals 60 minutes. Then I want to know, okay, 1 minute equals 60 seconds. So I know that I have in this 1 hour, I know that I have 60 minutes. This 1 hour right here is the same as 60 minutes. So I'm going to take that off. Now I have minutes compared to seconds. Minutes compared to seconds, because I know 1 hour was the same as 60 minutes. So now I can convert this. I can do some work here. I know that 60 minutes is how many seconds compared to 1 minute equals 60 seconds. Well, how did I go from here to here? I multiplied it by 60. So in this side, I'll have to do the same thing, multiply it by 60, and I get 3,600 seconds. Now, there was a lot going on in that problem, so if for some reason you struggled with it a little bit, don't hesitate to ask your teacher for some additional help. The next few problems we're going to talk about are elapsed time. I'm going to do one example, and then you're going to pause the video and try the next two on your own. In this particular case, this one is telling us that Mary fell asleep at 11 a.m. and woke up at 1:15 p.m. How long was her nap? So I know that I started at 11 a.m., and as time went on, I know that I got to 12 noon. It's important to know that at 12 noon, we shift over to p.m., and so that's where the 1:15 p.m. comes from. So I went from 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock. That was 1 hour. I went from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock, and that was 1 hour. And then from 1 o'clock to 1:15 was an additional 15 minutes. So now I have a total of 1 hour, 2 hours, and 15 minutes. There was a total of 2 hours and 15 minutes. What I would like you to do is pause the video and try the next two on your own and see if you could get an answer that matches mine. In this particular example, this tells us when they left and when they started. And so I had to work this one around a little bit differently. So I started at 12:50 and I went down to 4:40. I like to get myself to a whole number, so I know from 12:50 to 1 o'clock was 10 minutes. From here, I can go to 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 4 o'clock. From 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock is 1 hour. From 2 to 3 is 1 hour. From 3 to 4 is 1 hour. And then from 4 to 4:40 is 40 minutes. When I look at this, that gives me a total of 3 hours and 50 minutes. 3 hours and 50 minutes. If you didn't have a chance to try this one, go ahead and pause it and see what you get. When I completed this one, I had Jerry, who ran 3 hours and 5 minutes. And I had Martha, who ran 2 hours and 50 minutes. And that means that Jerry ran further. Jerry ran longest, maybe, because it wanted that, which is the same thing. In this case, I want to know, when did he get to end? When is the end time? So Gary gets to work at 9:30 a.m. each day. That's when he arrives. He has to work for 2 hours and 30 minutes, and then he gets to take a lunch break. So I'm going to add on 2 hours because I like to do it separate. You can do however you like. 9, 10, 11. So now I'm at 11 hours and 30 minutes. But then it said that I had to go 2 hours and 30 more minutes. I'm going to put 30 more minutes on here, and that's going to bring me to 12 noon. What I'd like you to do is pause the video and try the next two and see if you can figure out, when does the flight end and when did Linda stop walking. In this case, you should have found that the flight's going to end at 8:35 p.m. And in this case, Linda would have completed her walking at 1:15. There are times where you know how long you were doing something and when it ended, but you don't actually remember when it started. So this is finding the start time, working backward. In this case, there was a parade. It started at some point. I don't know what it was. But from this point, it went 2 hours and 20 minutes. And it stopped at 3:30. Now, you can choose to do this however you want. Again, I like to go in steps. So the first thing I'm going to do is take away an hour, and I get to 2 hours 30. And then I'm going to take away another hour, and I get to 1 hour 30. And now I need to take away this extra 20 minutes, and that's going to get me to 1:10 p.m. And so I just worked backward, marking my work as I went, because that's helpful to me. Some kids can just subtract this and get the right answer right away. What I'd like you to do is pause the video and try the next two problems for me and see if you match my answer when you're done. All right, for this question, if it closes at 4 and it opens for 7 hours and 30 minutes, it would have opened at 8:30 a.m. And for Gabriel's piano lesson, he would have started at 4:30 p.m. For your homework today, you are going to be describing a little bit, like how long does it take to put on a hat or eat an apple. You're going to be describing using a unit of time for that. You are going to be spending some time comparing which one's bigger, 60 minutes or 1 hour. Then you're going to spend some time converting. If I had 3 hours and 12 minutes, what does that look like later? And so good luck on your homework. If you do have questions, make sure you touch base with your teacher. As always, have a great day.